we've looked at ITV in terms of like the adult side of ITV, the regular ITV. We've looked at CITV, which was one of the first sections we looked at, and we've also done a section on the Power Rangers, which that's obviously separate from this whole conversation between BBC and ITV. So now we've done ITV. I think it's perfectly right that we should now go to probably the big, one of the bigger giants in the main TV landscape. We're talking about a company that has been funded for many years. I know they're struggling with funds as we speak, and they have to scale back a lot of things as of late. They are still doing what they do. Yeah, they're still doing what they do best. They're still functioning as a business right now. I'm, of course, referring to the BBC as we begin our childhood TV memories focusing on the BBC. And in terms of this episode specifically, we are going to be taking a look at a section of the BBC that's still going. Some are still debating whether it's going to last, considering the BBC are been thinking about possibly phasing this side of BBC out at some. I'm remaining hopeful it doesn't get phased out because I think it still has a purpose to serve. We are talking about obviously what most of you will call it today, CBBC, used to be referred to as Children's BBC. So without further ado, let's take a look back at some of my memories of Children's BBC or CBBC, however you want to refer it. We're going to have a chance to relive some of those golden days of CBBC. Let's take a look. Let's begin our travel back to the past of CBBC, some of the golden days of CBBC. What was some of the cool things that CBBC did? Well, the first program, I think it's appropriate that we bring this program up because I think this program deserves to be recognized, and I'm sure most of you will remember this, especially if when you were a kid, you probably remembered it, especially if you were born during my times, the 90s. I am, of course, and there's actually a program that actually has sort of my name in it in a way, and maybe not the Sammy part, but the Sam part, yes it does, because in case you didn't know, there was a program back in the day who was referred to as Fireman Sam. Yes, Fireman Sam is as most of you will probably remember, it's a classic, and obviously that classic intro, obviously back then they focused on animation style, or I guess you could say motion captured animation, because a lot of there used to be a lot of programs that used the clay and motion capture, that type of stuff, and this was one of those programs. Fireman Sam did a really good job on building that sort of motion capture, using models to sort of move them about and everything. It was, to be fair, for them it was a little bit more affordable to do. I mean, they kind of looked at it like this was a great idea for the kids at the time, and it certainly paid off for those who were responsible for the making of Fireman Sam. And obviously that theme tune has lived on for years and years, and it's still, even though the theme tune may have changed because Fireman Sam has changed since then, but luckily you can watch the classic Fireman Sam through the BritBox section on ITVX if you're willing to pay for premium, which I still think it shouldn't be locked behind the premium. I still think you should be able to get free access to classic telly, but for some reason ITV thinks, we'll just put it under premium and see if people can afford it, which I think is a stupid idea, and personally it shouldn't really be a thing, but there you go. But nevertheless, Fireman Sam, I obviously remember watching this show when I was a kid, obviously, and those classic animated episodes are the ones I remember the most of Fireman Sam, really, and they still, if they ever get a chance to be repeated, I'm sure they'll live on many more years. That's the version of Fireman Sam I remember watching. So then we go a show which had my name in it, like Fireman Sam, to the opposite end where you have a fireman. We move on to a postman. Yes, Postman Pat also had a similar treatment. The whole clay model sort of motion capture animation concept obviously carried over into the whole phenomenon of Postman Pat, which is obviously still lives on to this day. Obviously, Postman Pat's a lot CGI now than it was back then, but obviously back then people probably prefer the Postman Pat back then, to be fair, because obviously he was a bit of a model, and obviously many of the actors had kind of they kind of got a little cheesy with their sort of pronunciation of stuff, which was, I think that's what people kind of make, because I have seen memes of people using the classic Postman Pat, making memes of some of the stuff said by the voice actor. So you can see why I do that, because of the way that they spoke, their characters spoke, and they also make memes out rearranging some of the words. Honestly, though, Postman Pat, I'm sure most, but in all seriousness, Postman Pat is, with his black and white cat, always lives on. That theme tune will live on. The character will live on, of course, and I'm sure many of you will have nostalgia memories remembering the animation version of Postman Pat, and obviously seeing an image like this brings back so many memories to you looking at it, and it does to me, and I'm sure it does to many of you who remember watching this version of Postman Pat before they decided to make a CGI version. I mean, that's probably for the kids for today, really, but we remember the old school version, so it's okay. Moving on, we're going to take a break from the whole clay animation concept, because we need to also acknowledge another section of CBBC that I'm actually interested to see if anybody still thinks of this show to this very day. I would imagine they still Playdays. Playdays, in case you need to sort of memorize the opening, essentially you would have this sort of painted picture. Basically shows a bus traveling through I guess a street or something. Your typical going on the bus and doing their services. If you've ever been to the bus in the UK, then you know how a bus works in the UK. You simply go into your destination. Playdays is essentially that it opens in that sort of format, and then obviously you have I guess you could say young kids getting on the bus, and then eventually it leads to the Playdays logo. You obviously have the famous bird being the puppet characters of the program that are very famous for that show, and I just remember those days of Playdays. I mean, Playdays was super fun, seeing the bird, the bird and the cat getting along together in the show. And I mean, what can I say? Playdays was a great show, wasn't it? Playdays, the days of Playdays on the CBBC, and having that intro multicolored bus, and even the presenters as well. And obviously, surprisingly, it was back in before it became Playdays. It was actually referred to as Playbus before it became Playdays, which was surprising. And in fact, this was actually, turns out, a successor from Play School, which was the older version of this program, which they did in the 80s, which I'm sure if you were born in the 80s, you'll be familiar version of the show. But no, this one is the more 90s version, works best. And also, surprisingly, BBC received plates from the National Playday Association, apparently, for the name change, but I don't know why that happened, but there you go. And in terms of some of the presenters, in case you're wondering how many presenters they actually had some quite big names there part of this, such as Zoe, who we all know recently did Radio 2 Breakfast Show before she moved on from that. You've also Lizzie Walsh, who's also in here. Other names, Johnny Griffiths is another name that's also mentioned. Nick Baker, surprisingly, was this as well. Simon Davis also role on this show at some point. So they kind of rotated between different presenters each episode. Clive Duncan, surprisingly, he did it at one time. So you had a couple of children presenter favorites who kept rotating between different faces each time, and it did very well for them to do that. And they've done over 1,174 episodes and 9 series. That's how popular that show was. So Playdays will always live on, and images like this will live on. And you never know, maybe we'll see a DVD release of this at some point. I mean, it did come out on VHS at the time, so maybe a DVD release would be helpful for any of the younger people of today. I think that would help. And in fact, Christopher Jarvis, who also appeared in this, actually would go on to become a presenter for CBBS down the line. So he would, because of this, getting a role in the CBBS presenting team. Yes, Playdays will obviously live on for many, many years, obviously, and rightfully so, because it deserves to be remembered for what it did. Now, another program we also have to acknowledge is the favorite talking car known as Broom. Yeah, Broom the car. Yes, I know it doesn't talk, but it makes sound effects, and he did a lot of adventures during his time as a children's favorite. He went to all sorts of unusual places maybe some will remember some of those locations that you've been to, but nevertheless, Brom has had he had a great time on the telly, even though interestingly, well, what was really interesting is that during the 90s, the ending of the theme tune in the 90s was slightly different compared to the theme tune that they gave him, the noughties, where it was slightly sort of modernized a little bit compared to how it was in the 90s, where they kind of just kept it low key, but then in the 90s they kind of made him a little bit more of a, I guess you could say, more of like a superhero, not a superhero, but more of like a, oh look, he's the hero of the day sort of excitement, if you get what I mean. But yeah, I mean, and mind you, like I said, not only did Brom did his whole 90s series, he also came back in the noughties and did some series in the noughties as well, where we got that weird, like, I still don't understand why they did that, but there you but nevertheless, and interestingly, the car, I think someone still has the car they built for the program. I believe someone owns it. I'm not too sure who does. Nevertheless, I think the prop still gets shown in museums and stuff from time to time. So if you're lucky, if you ever go to a car museum, you might see it. Nevertheless, Brom is, it's another classic from was responsible for Brom's existence, and rightfully so, because they were very popular with their other shows. So it makes sense that Brom would become a classic as well. It lived on to many more years, and then eventually also great time the BBC, and it even made an appearance on the CBBC channel as well, because CBBC re-show those episodes from time to time as well. So definitely gets remembered for what it's worth, and rightfully so, because then of course we come back to animations, because we do have some other animations that I also remember, such as Pingu. Yes, I probably butchered the pronunciation there. The Pingu noise that is famous. Obviously, he's just a lovable penguin from the Arctic that lives in his igloo and loves to go on adventures. He's just beloved by a lot of children. Interestingly, they made it out, I think they made it from motion caption clay, basically similar to how they did Wallace, is how they did Pingu. He did very well. He's had out lots and lots of episodes under his umbrella, and rightfully so, because he's had many different illustrations of himself. His model would get updated later editions. They would do like versions of his theme tune, but back in the early day, he would have like this sort of low key intro that worked best for him, which is really good. So Pingu's another character who people love the clay version of Pingu, and surprisingly, he had his own hits album with David Hasselhoff. Apparently he did in 1993. He decided to release a rap song with David Hasselhoff. Don't know how that happened, but there you go. By the way, Spot is a Dog, another animation which is based on the books written by Eric Hill. Well, I mean, the Adventures of Spot, of course. He what can I say? I mean, Spot the dog likes to go in parks and stuff, and he has this brown spot on his chest, because obviously he was kind of like one of those, probably only has one spot, but just likes to have fun. And he also but obviously he was a little dog, so of course he's not going to be able to do too much. But he wanted to just hang around, be able to meet other animals and just explore, which is basically what the character was. He was a character who likes to explore. That is what Spotty, what Spot the dog. I don't know why I called him Spotty, or maybe that might be a nickname for him, Spotty. Yeah, he did all sorts of things in his adventures. He had quite a lot of episodes, and he even had some VHS releases because he was that popular. So, Spot the dog, The Adventures of Spot. You can now, and also surprisingly, Disney released a book with him called The Spotty Goes to School, which was which, by the way, his books, Spot books, were actually the best-selling ever. So you can see why it was very, very popular, because it was bestseller. But yeah, The Adventures of Spot, another great show that I remember from. Now, another program that we also have got to acknowledge, because of course I'm sure everybody remembers Tinky Winky, Dipsy, Lilo and Po. Of course, I'm talking about the Teletubbies. And I've already mentioned about the Teletubby house. Yes, the Teletubby house was built around the same area where the Tots TV house was built. So you can imagine what it was like. Juices to be filming in two different areas. One area filming Tots TV, another area in that same location filming Teletubbies and the Teletubby house, which they built it in that same field. So it's but yeah, the Teletubbies, I mean, there's no, rightfully so, they were very popular. They had their own CD sync of their theme tune that got to #1, came very close to being a Christmas #1 before they were beaten by the Spice Girls. Right, I mean, to be fair, the Spice Girls were more popular, so you could see why. Nevertheless, Teletubbies did have very, very successful run on CBBC, so much so their episodes repeated on CBBC a few years later, and they've even got a revive, new actors, new voice actors taking on the characters because they had to replace the old episodes because of, I guess, because of copyright reasons, so they decided to